Welcome to the Law Dad Roy podcast, featuring trial dad and trial lawyer Roy Willey. Join us as we break down the biggest cases, the legal strategies that shape justice, and the stories behind the courtroom victories. Whether you're a legal pro, a curious mind, or just here for the ride, this is the podcast for you. Let's talk law. Let's talk justice. Let's talk winning. And now from beautiful downtown Charleston, South Carolina, here is your host, Law Dad Roy Willey.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to our first episode of the Law Dad Roy podcast. I am here with trial lawyer extraordinaire Matt Burgess, and today we are going to catch up on a trial that we tried together, just last week. So Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
We don't really know what we're doing yet, so we will do the best we can, but we've been receiving obviously a lot of questions, a lot of people reaching out about our $700 million verdict, and so we thought we would get together just to give a little bit more information about the case and the trial. And one of the questions people have had is, what is this case about? There seems to be a lot of people that have not heard about Brittanee Drexel yet. So fill them in. Let them know what the case was about and what we were doing.
Yeah, so Brittanee Drexel, she was 17 and in high school in the Rochester area of upstate New York in April of 2009 when she came down to Myrtle Beach with some older friends of hers. She was at a stage in her life, as many 17-year-olds are, where she was rebelling a little bit and actually did not tell her mother that she was coming to Myrtle Beach. She had one of her friends call her mom and tell her that she was going to hang out with some friends at one of the lakes in that area of New York for spring break. But she came down to Myrtle Beach, and had it not gone the way that it did, the fact that she went to Myrtle Beach and didn't tell her mom is probably something that they would laugh about today. But she just found herself in what is truly a horrific situation. She disappeared, and it took a decade and a half for authorities to unravel what had happened to her. What I'd learned throughout the course of our representing her mother, Dawn Drexel, is that Dawn was truly the driving force as far as pushing law enforcement to find answers and to find her daughter. But initially, she disappeared April 25th, 2009. In 2011, they became interested in a sex offender that lived in the area by the name of Raymond Douglas Moody. That at that point in time didn't really go anywhere, and they became interested in other persons of interest. There was a jailhouse snitch, for lack of a better term, by the name of Taquan Bowers, who told a story where he had seen another man named Timothy Taylor somehow be involved in her murder in McClellanville. He said that that she was gang raped, killed, and dumped in a gator pit. And Dawn, throughout the course of this, hearing all these stories as she's pushing for answers. And it turned out that theory of the case was not true. And another FBI team led by Mike Connolly became involved in the case in 2016. And they began reviewing surveillance footage from that stretch of road in Myrtle Beach, looking in detail at every single vehicle that passed down this road during the period of time in which Brittanee went missing, which took months. They looked again at cell phone data. Brittanee was texting frequently with friends and with her boyfriend right before she went missing, and then suddenly the text just went dead. So they looked at that cell phone data. They looked at where her cell phone was pinging around the time that she went missing, and it led them back to Raymond Moody, the person of interest closer to the beginning of their investigation. And thanks to Mike's good work, Raymond Moody ultimately confessed to having kidnapped, raped, and murdered Brittanee Drexel with his girlfriend slash accomplice, Angel Voss, who has also been convicted of several offenses in connection with Brittanee's disappearance and murder. We represented Dawn in the civil suit, which is just the latest in Dawn's ongoing fight for justice for her daughter Brittanee. And Dawn is truly impressive in the way that she has fought for her child. It's something to behold. She's been through a horrific situation in herself, for herself, having lost her daughter, and the way that she's fought for her child and really just driven the investigation and just insisted on having answers is something else. And it was an honor to represent her in this civil suit, which is the latest part of this case.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that, and people have asked, how did Brittanee end up, in Myrtle Beach, and I think you did a good job explaining that. Did you ever go to the beach for spring break when you were younger? Yeah, me too. And it's not that uncommon, particularly on the East Coast, if you live within, a couple hours or an hour of the beach, to go to the beach for spring break, and that's really just what these kids did. What was interesting to me throughout the course of this, is it's a situation where Brittanee was doing absolutely, nothing wrong. People have said, well, how did she come into contact with, a registered sex offender, obviously quite a bit older than her? And that was, throughout the course of this, over the last couple of years, kind of a point of contention, right? When the case first came to me, you have a lot of thoughts and a lot of theories, but what did you find most interesting, about that? I mean, it was truly just an innocent situation where she came in contact with these creeps, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, it really was just the absolute worst of luck. Yeah. She was walking from one hotel to another hotel, and I think our understanding is that she was offered a ride and essentially lured into the vehicle by Angel Voss, obviously a less imposing figure than a shaved head, muscular Ray Moody, and they said that they could give her a ride from one hotel to the other hotel, and unfortunately, she got in the vehicle not suspecting that anything horrific like this would happen. But
yeah, and I think that's an important thing to remember. Is this happened 2009, so 16 years ago. There's no Uber, there's no Lyft. That period of time. I mean, catching a cab in Myrtle Beach is like playing Russian roulette or something. Good luck with that. You call the cabs half the time and they wouldn't come. So. She's faced basically, I think the testimony was these hotels were a mile or a mile and a half, apart. And the text messages with her boyfriend were, she was going back to her hotel from her friend's hotel, basically to pack and go to bed, for the night because they were leaving the next morning. And, apparently this lady pulled up and said, hey, you really shouldn't be walking out here, or whatever she said, to get her to get in the car, and offered her a ride, and then the bad stuff started happening.
Yeah. According to the cell phone data, the vehicle that she was in, based on the speed of the pings on her phone, they determined that she was in a vehicle when they're looking at it later. But she was taken from this area of Myrtle Beach to a remote location in Georgetown County, South Carolina, which is roughly 15 miles away, maybe a little bit more.
Maybe a little bit more, yeah. I don't know exactly.
And eventually the ping stopped later that evening, and for a long time that was all they knew. And
and we found out that once she got in the vehicle, obviously, well, not obviously, but apparently Moody handcuffed her, and that's basically when the text stopped, and her boyfriend back in Rochester became very concerned because Brittanee was a teenage girl, and that meant she was living in her phone and always texting, and back then it wasn't iPhones. I think she had a flip phone or something, but when those texts stopped, he became really concerned and actually after a very short period of time, reached out to Dawn. And obviously we learned, how Dawn first learned that Brittanee was even in Myrtle Beach, was when he reached out. So you're right. I mean, just absolutely bad luck. The worst sort of situation, that you could imagine, happened. So that was that. And unfortunately, they took her, we found, to the Pole Yard boat landing, and they had already had a tent, set up. This was totally premeditated. There were some text messages between Angel and Ray about going hunting for a girl, is what they called it. And, just totally horrific stuff. The crazy part about all of that is, well, there's a lot of crazy parts, but I mean, Angel Voss, is a mother, grandmother, all this sort of stuff. And, she's actually the one that used the term going hunting for girls, as far as I remember. And, they did that, and they got Brittanee to the tent, and apparently the phone, got disposed of, her phone, and she was raped for however long, and then we learned, through the law enforcement investigation, which we worked very closely, throughout this with the FBI, that he killed her, he strangled her, and then. To make matters, I guess, worse, or make sure that she was dead, apparently he, stabbed her with an ice pick and then held her under the water for a period of time just to make sure, she was dead. So it's just like the most disgusting story. And when this case came to us, Dawn, another lawyer, basically referred it to us, and they said we found that Ray has inherited some property, and so there are some, assets to collect. But for Dawn, and for us, frankly, I mean, this has never been about the money,
Right.
And you've been on some of those conversations, with Dawn. What sticks out to you most about just kind of her motivation and driving force throughout this, whole thing?
These are just regular people, and she found herself in the worst of situations with her daughter having gone missing. She doesn't even know her daughter has gone to Myrtle Beach when she receives the call from Brittanee's boyfriend telling her, Brittanee went to Myrtle Beach with some friends and now she's missing and they can't find her. Which, to his credit, he got to Dawn pretty quickly, because Brittanee truly was texting nonstop while she was in Myrtle Beach. So when those text messages stopped, they knew quickly that something was wrong. So she gets this call. It's the worst call you can get as a mother, I imagine. And Dawn, the next day, drives down to Myrtle Beach and doesn't leave for months after that, just organizing searches, working with law enforcement, driving the investigation forward, insisting on answers. At one point over the years, she had moved to Myrtle Beach. And she truly has been fighting, to find Brittanee for so many years, and now it's more of a fight for justice.
Took 13 years to find Brittanee.
Yeah.
13 years, and you're right, she moved to Myrtle Beach for a couple of years. Really, she said, just to be front of mind so that she could work with law enforcement and keep Brittanee's case moving. There were billboards taken out, there were flyers, there were marches. It was very difficult during that period of time, if you were living in this area, the low country of South Carolina or the Grand Strand, not to know that we were looking for Brittanee Drexel. It was truly everywhere. Dawn kept, Brittanee's name and Brittanee's face out there. And what struck me is, Mike Connolly, the FBI agent, who was not the original FBI agent on the case, a few years, actually more than a few years into the case, Dawn, he said Dawn just showed up at his office and said, "Hey, I really need you to take this case over, and we gotta figure this out." And it was that meeting. Mike said, I forget how many daughters he has, but he's a father, and just something about Dawn struck him, and he undertook the case with kind of the sole mission of, we're going to find Brittanee. And once they did that, Mike, working with James and the rest of the team, focused in on finding Brittanee as opposed to trying to figure out everything that happened. Just one focus: let's find Brittanee. They went back to the beginning, and using the evidence that had already been collected, they didn't have any new evidence. They solved the case, and that's what was kind of perplexing to me, is the fact that we had all this evidence that already existed. We knew, for example, that the Ford Explorer that is shown on the street camera right about the place that Brittanee disappeared was linked to Angel Voss's brother and owned by him. And we knew that Angel Voss was dating, Ray Moody at that period of time. And we knew, because Ray Moody got a speeding ticket the next day, that he was in the area. He got a speeding ticket, I think it was in Surfside Beach, which is kind of, right there between the two. So it's kind of, interesting to me that we knew all of that, and it really just took a fresh set of eyes and people that were, I guess, appropriately motivated, to really figure it out.
Yeah, the case landed with the right fresh set of eyes, and Mike's team did a great job. And even after Raymond Moody came in and confessed, they continued working to make sure that confession was corroborated with actual evidence, to ensure that that what he was telling them, or at least the important parts of it, were truthful. And he led them to Brittanee's body, her remains, which were located on what is now some private property. They went in with the team, an excavator, and I believe she was found roughly within 4 feet of where Ray Moody said she was. It took, I think, 3 days, just because they took their time to make sure everything was done correctly as far as excavating the site. But
they talked about going in, first going in with a shovel, and then, they had the excavator, and then really down to the point where they were literally working with trowels and paintbrushes, kind of like an archaeological site in a way, because they did not want to damage, the remains. And what was interesting to me, I know you've done some criminal law, prior to, doing civil, exclusively. I haven't done a lot of criminal law. It was amazing to me the extent that they went to corroborate that confession. And what we learned was there's a lot of, I guess, creeps out there that, get a thrill out of, like, confessing to things they didn't do. Which I didn't know that was a thing. But apparently it is. And so they really, they put in so much work just to corroborate. He confessed, what we learned was he really confessed to protect Angel. That was part of it, and he was very clear initially, which of course was a lie, that she had nothing to do with it and whatever. That all turned out to be false, and she's now admitted that those were lies, and that's why she's spending 18 years in prison. But the extent that they went to uncover Brittanee's remains and to find the body, to corroborate that story, and they did, and then they were able to confirm it with dental records, and Brittanee's nose ring, was still at the site. She had a nose ring at the time, and they were able to return that to her, to her sister, Marissa. It was just a amazing kind of effort, and I've done a lot of civil cases, obviously, at this point, a lot. And in that, you have interactions with law enforcement, because typically, in a catastrophic case or a wrongful death case, there's always a law enforcement component. Law enforcement is always looking into it, even a basic car wreck case, right? The police come out, they write a report, they talk to people, they get their information, and so there's always that. And typically in a case, when you're doing testimony, law enforcement, they come in, they say, okay, when do I need to be there? How long is it going to take? And you got to get them a subpoena, and then they come in, and it's willingly. They testify, and then they leave. Not the case with this guy.
Not at all. Mike was truly personally invested in this case, and just dedicated to helping Brittanee's family in their quest to find her, and then to get her some justice. But he's obviously developed a really close relationship with Dawn Connolly, Brittanee's mother. Mike's team just did a fantastic job, and we're all very grateful for that he put this guy away.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever had a criminal case or investigation that was part of your life, I mean, he's the guy that I would want on my team. Really, really thorough, very direct guy. I mean, asks you for whatever it is, that he wants. But obviously, has a heart for people and is in it for the right reasons. I mean, but he was there for the entire trial. I mean, he did not miss, 1 minute of that.
Yeah, he testified on the first day, and then I walked in the second day, and he was still there, which was surprising.
Yeah.
I guess it shouldn't have been, because I'd gotten to know him a little bit at that point. But typically, when you have law enforcement come in and testify in these cases, they do leave once their testimony is over. But he was there for the whole thing. Talking to Dawn during breaks, and just very, very, very invested in this.
Yeah, and one of the things I learned, as well, and I don't know if you heard him say it at lunch one day. I didn't know this. There's a mandatory retirement age for the FBI, and it's like 50 or 55 or 52 or something. I mean, it's pretty low. So if anybody's listening that can put in a pitch for that, that's ridiculous. I mean, this is a guy, he's going to be retiring soon, and he, maybe going to work somewhere else or whatever. But retirement age is too low, so it's kind of an aside. But just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
Not a guy we want leaving the FBI. So we got through day one, and you go into a trial, you really never know what to expect. We didn't know. Obviously Ray Moody is a psychopath. He. How much time did you spend reading the jailhouse messages and texts and communications? I mean, they're voluminous.
There were a lot of them.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that you could have a tablet and just be sending messages all the time in jail. I knew that there was some of that, but to the extent that he was communicating with Angel Voss primarily on the outside there was a lot of it. Yeah. Hundreds of pages of messages, and so. Read through all of those. Coming into trial, we didn't necessarily know how he was going to conduct himself. At one point, he had indicated during his communications with Angel that he was going to basically try and give everyone a hard time and tell everyone to kiss his ass, is the way that he put it. And you could tell that the civil suit was actually something that was high in his mind in terms of its importance. He almost seemed to care about that more than the fact that he was in jail in some of the messages. And so coming into trial, we had to prepare for every possibility. Is he going to come in here and try and act like a wild man, or is he going to be more submissive and apologetic, whether or not he actually means it? Apologetic the way that he was during his sentencing hearing when he expressed remorse for the things he had done. Ultimately, he came in and was, I would say, submissive.
He seemed, resigned to the fact. I mean, like I said after the trial, I don't really put much credibility into anything that, comes out of his mind or his mouth. I mean, I just don't. He's a psychopath, so it is what it is. But that is certainly, how he presented. To your point, the thing that kind of struck me, you pulled out on the jailhouse messages, is he was very concerned about the civil suit. At some point after the criminal charges had come up, he transferred some property that he inherited, and so that was kind of top of mind. And that's something that obviously we're going to be going after in this judgment collection phase, along with other property. And it's just it's interesting because we talk about full justice all the time, right? That's a term that we use, that I use all the time, full justice. And I don't believe in half justice or quarter justice. We have to have full justice. And in our system, there's a lot of different types of justice. I mean, in our legal system, we have civil justice, we have criminal justice, right? And kind of in the grand scheme of things, we got emotional justice, we got spiritual justice, we got moral justice. We have all these forms of justice, and we can't do anything about, the kind of final judgment. That's not on us. That's between him and his creator. But here we've got criminal justice and civil justice. And in this case, a lot of people see a case and they say, oh, well, and actually people wrote in, and they had questions about it. Well, he got life in prison, so what's the point of this? What's the point of taking a civil verdict? And for us, it's always about full justice, right? It's something Dawn wanted to do, and I said that in my closing. I said, Mike did because she asked, and we're doing because she asked, and it's important. If somebody does something like this, not only should they lose their freedom, they should lose their finances, right? I mean, they should not have property that they are, that they are passing down or transferring or whatever, to anybody. My real, I had a concern. I don't know how you felt about it. We talked about it quite a bit, and prayed about it and all sorts of stuff. But how do you get to a damages number? In a case like this is what people have asked, like, oh, well, that seems like a lot or whatever. And it is a lot, but it's because, the damage is a lot. I mean, I have $2. I wouldn't take $700 million or $7 trillion to go through, what Dawn has been through, over the course of the last 16 years. So, I mean, and we've talked about this before, but like, how were you thinking about damages in this case, kind of, as we went through it and we're trying to decide, how do you present this to a jury, because, we talked about a lot of numbers, and it's like, I don't know, if I'm on the jury, I'm like, gosh, they're asking for a very little amount of money. If you're asking for like, I don't know, 20 million or something, so it's just very difficult to figure that out. What were your kind of thoughts as we were going through this process?
Well, I don't think that there is a number. You could write zeros all day, and I don't know that it would be enough. Obviously, Don is only going to recover a small fraction of the $700 million verdict, but I think you put it best during your opening and your closing, that the amount that we were asking for was an amount that would send a message. If you come here, whether you are Ray Moody and are of very limited means, or if you're a billionaire, if you do things like the things that he did, we're going to take everything from you. Right. And I think this number that the jury arrived at sends that message.
Yeah, and I was, I tried to be really clear with the jury because I wanted them to understand that on actual damages, you don't take into account, the defendant and what the defendant is worth or the defendant's ability to pay. What you take into account is the damage that has been sustained, by the plaintiff, that the defendant caused to the plaintiff, and that's it. You can't take into account whether they can pay it or not pay it, and the jury, I believe that the jury did that. I do think we had their question. Their first question back was, there haven't been any numbers given, with respect to each of the elements, and we don't know, is there life insurance, is there a house? It's pretty clear to me that they wanted to make sure that whatever verdict they had, fully compensated Dawn. And of course the judge, charged them correctly on the law, which is, you can't calculate emotional damages to a mathematical certainty, nor are you required to. And it was up to them to use their, calm, measured judgment to arrive at a number, and on that, what, they did. I mean, they arrived at, $200 million, which, that was their verdict. So, that part I thought was interesting, and when you go to the punitive phase, of course, ability to pay is a factor, but it's almost a factor in the inverse in a lot of ways. You know, like when they, and I've never really listened to it because it's really not that important, because usually it's like a corporation and you have some evidence of, you know, how much money they make every year or whatever. In this case, it was a little more, I guess, interesting to me. So it just kind of caught my ear when Judge Hyman read that, read that charge and said, ability to pay is a factor. You don't want to affect economic bankruptcy because it's meant to be a punishment, but that is not I forget the exact language, but basically that's not a factor that is dispositive. Even if it does affect economic bankruptcy, you can still award it if you think it's appropriate. You just have to consider the fact of the ability to pay or not pay. And in this case, obviously a $500 million punitive damage award. Ray Moody's not going to be paying that. There's no doubt. But I thought that the jury really did a good job, because they even asked a question. They asked a question during deliberations on punitives. Are there any caps?
Right.
And what did you make of that when that question came out?
That they wanted to set that number high.
Yeah.
At an amount that would send a message. How much can we award, basically?
Yeah. Yeah, I was. That's always obviously a good number or a good question. If they're asking that, it's kind of like I've tried cases before where the jury's asked for a calculator, and you as a plaintiff's lawyer, you feel, okay, well, this is good because they made it to damages, first of all, right? They made it down the verdict form. But also the number is big enough, whatever it is, that they need a calculator. They can't do it on the back of the envelope. But, I thought that was really interesting. This jury, was really attentive. And really paying attention. In a very difficult case. It's the type of case where really you want to turn your head. You don't want to watch it. It's almost that horrifying, or it is that horrifying. But they were, I thought they were really tuned in the whole time.
They were really engaged. I told you this during your closing. You probably noticed it yourself while you were giving your closing, but Roy was talking, and one of the things that he said must have connected with a couple of those jurors in a really strong way, because you hear a juror go, and I was like, all right, this is going well.
Yeah.
They were really engaged, really just connected to what Roy was saying to them during the closing, and I think a lot of them, probably all of them, have heard of this case well before this trial, and so they had a sense of what Dawn had gone through in her decade and a half fight for Brittanee's justice, and I think that they felt a lot of empathy for Dawn and wanted to do right by her.
Yeah. When you, just going back a minute to those jailhouse messages, as you were going through those, what was kind of like the strangest thing that stood out to you that this psychopath murderer was talking about on his jail tablet? Which, by the way, well, I'm not going to make that comment, but I think we should have a real conversation about whether or not murderers and child rapists should be allowed to have tablets in jail, but that's a conversation for another day. But anyway, what did you think about, as far as the messages?
There were a lot of strange things in there, which I expected given who this person is. The things that kind of popped out to me, first, he has a relative, it's actually Angel's son's wife, I believe, who somebody in his orbit is named Brittanee. And when he was typing these messages to Angel, when he was referencing that person, this different Brittanee, he spelled it Brittanee, which is how Brittanee Drexel's name is spelled. That's the only time I've ever seen the name Brittanee spelled that way.
Right. And so you looked into that.
Yeah, and he spelled it this way more than once, referencing this other Brittanee. And I looked into it, and this Brittanee, her name was spelled Brittany, the way you see Brittany most commonly
Right.
spelled, I would say.
Right.
So he was spelling this person's name incorrectly in the way that Brittanee Drexel's name is spelled. So
his own like quasi family member. I
Yeah.
mean, in a way.
Yeah.
Because really, all of this kind of property and inheritance and all this, as I understand it, at least, this was all kind of about Angel's grandkids, not even his
Right.
biological family.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is strange.
Yeah, someone that he interacted with frequently enough to where he cared about them and was sending messages to Angel.
Right, asking about them.
Yeah, let's make sure that so-and-so is okay. So this person who he knows well and is named Brittany, he was spelling her name incorrectly, spelling it the way that Brittany Drexel's name, Brittany, is spelled.
Yeah.
So that was strange. And he did it on more than one occasion in those messages. Another strange one, he sent a message to Angel, and I think that they were having some relationship issues. I don't even know how you put it, but
Right.
they were having some form of disagreement at that point. And he said, I want you to get a message to the grandkids for me. One of them had apparently walked home from school alone. And he sent a message. He said, just read this to him or let him read it. And then he typed out a message to the kid and said, basically, I heard that you walked home from school alone. Why did you do that? We care so much about you, and something could happen if you do that. If you walk home from school alone, someone could snatch you up. And reading that, it was just unbelievable that this person who had done exactly that, had abducted this 17-year-old girl, raped her, killed her, was saying these things to his grandkids. It was something else. And
in fact, I mean, in the trial, we heard, I mean, not only Brittany, I mean, he had sexually assaulted multiple minors over the course of years. And in fact, I mean, we heard directly from one who in the 80s was 8 years old. She had walked, it's the 80s, so people, feel safe in kind of small town California, walking, she had walked up to school to play with friends. He, walking the opposite way down the sidewalk, dribbling a basketball, as she tells the story, told her that she couldn't go up there, playground was closed. So she turns around to go walk back home, and when they get to the point of where his car is, like, he's walking behind, he opens the door and basically pushes her in, takes her to an abandoned construction site, and sexually molests her, and until she was able to escape. And this little 8-year-old girl, I mean, 8-year-olds, that's kind of the point where you're coming into some street smarts. I have an 8-year-old son, I mean, and starting to test the things. She figured out that, and she tells the story very vividly, I mean, 30 years later, that she knew that if she could convince him that she had to use the bathroom, that was her best chance at escape. And so this little 8-year-old girl says, I need to use the bathroom. And he opens the back door because they're in the back, lets her out. He's still holding her hand. He says, squat down right here. And she says, for whatever reason, he let go for just 1 second. And she took off, naked, running through the neighborhood, through this abandoned construction site into the neighborhood, found these people that were out for a walk, and that's how she was rescued. And he got caught on that. I mean, that's the crazy part about this whole thing, is he got caught. He got 40 years in prison, which is too little for number one. But then he spent like half of that.
Yeah. All of this was in California. To do what Raymond Moody did one time, you have to be a total psychopath and a POS.
Right.
This was not a one-off for Raymond Moody. He was convicted in California of raping either 7 or 8 kids between the ages of 8 and 18 years old.
Yeah.
Got 40 years in jail. The law, I understand, in California at the time was that you could only serve a certain amount based on what the criminal offenses giving rise to that time were.
Well, he got parole, right? He got parole. I mean, that was the other twist in the story you never see coming. So in jail, he gets this jailhouse husband, Ernie Merchant, and basically they become a couple. and Ernie's just in for like some drug crimes or whatever. You know, I mean, you know, nothing violent, and I think that was like part of his story was like, I'm a changed person. I'm in this committed, like, gay relationship with Ernie. You know, Ernie gets out first, and then Ray gets out, and then they move to Georgetown. And the way Ernie tells the story, and, you know, told it during the trial, is Ray is fine. Like, Ray's perfectly normal. He's keeping a schedule. He's, like, coming and going, everything. And then once his probation was up, it was like, I forget exactly how many years of probation he got, but it ended in 2009. And I think it was 2009 maybe, or late 2008. And when Ernie says when that probation ended, it was like the monster was unleashed. That's when he started going around with Angel, and Ernie says he bought a motorcycle, which I guess for Ernie was something that stuck out. And then April of 2009, that's when this happened.
Yeah.
I mean,
he got off parole and he quit faking it.
Yeah, quit faking it.
The true Ray Moody came back out.
Yeah, and you know, had it not been for Dawn, I mean, he would have got away with this. There's no doubt. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, this was basically a cold case. Like, nobody knew. You know, you don't keep looking for. I mean, you always keep looking, you know, but you don't actively keep looking for a missing person for 13 years. I mean, you assume they're dead, number one, you know, as a law enforcement, and, you know, you got to go on to other cases. You got limited resources, but Dawn, I mean, her persistence just kept going. I mean, she just did not end. You know, so it was amazing. You know, the one thing that kind of stuck out to me about all of this, I mean, it's going to sound kind of crazy, but I just get like choked up even thinking about it, is the day before they found Brittanee. You know, Dawn says she got in her car, she turns on the radio, there's a new song, and this is Lauren Daigle's song, Rescue, which, you know, candidly, I didn't know who Lauren Daigle was before all of this. But if you listen to that song, I mean, that song is Dawn, you know, and it talks about sending out an army, you know, to find you and never forgetting and keeping up hope. So for me, that was, you know, Dawn called the FBI and said, hey, I know you all are out there digging. Listen to this song. And the guy said they turned it on while they were digging, and found it the next day. So I thought that was pretty cool. What stuck out to you most just about this, you know, about this trial, this case, kind of the way it unfolded?
As far as Ray Moody and his accomplice, Angel Voss, one thing that stuck out to me was Angel Voss, because I think publicly she has been presented as more of a side figure who was involved in some smaller way, when in reality that's not true. You know, Ray Moody had already done all of these horrible things. He went to California, he was convicted of these crimes against children, and then he moves back to Georgetown, where he is from. He's done all of that stuff, and so it's not surprising that he has sick fantasies. Angel Voss, who for whatever reason had some form of obsession over Ray, just basically says that she wants to get in on it with him.
Yeah.
And she was a major driving factor of what they did, as opposed to somebody who, you know, was an accomplice after the fact or something along those lines. She was actively involved. So that was something that I didn't know, despite having followed the case over the years. But the biggest thing was just how strong and impressive and courageous Dawn is. When I'd seen coverage of this case over the years, you know, you would see her pop up in a news clip where she's talking about the case, and, you know, I probably had the thought at some point, you know, well, it's 7 years later, it's 8 years later, I bet she's just so tired of, you know, every time that the FBI thinks that they have something, that she has to relive this nightmare over and over again, and you know, put her life on hold while she comes back to her missing daughter, essentially. But that was not. Dawn was there the whole way, every day, 15 years, and continues to fight for Brittanee, and she just truly has.
I mean, the last 2 weeks. I mean, just in the last 2 weeks, she lives in Florida now. She comes to Charleston, you know, on her own dime, staying with a friend basically. to go to the sentencing hearing for Angel Voss, who's being prosecuted for lying to the FBI, which is kind of the best thing they can get her on. And she admits basically the facts of, what she did at that point. Dawn's here for that. You go with her, to the federal court for the sentencing. I'm actually on vacation. I'm on a Disney cruise or whatever. And Dawn's texting me about, let me know when you get back. We got to have this other meeting. And I'm like, all right, I'll let you know as soon as I get back. And I love hearing, Dawn is, I don't want to act like she's pestering or anything. She's not. We have a really good relationship. I get back, I let her know. She says, okay, Thursday we're going to meet with Jimmy Richardson, the solicitor in Conway. I want him to prosecute state-level charges on Angel, for kidnapping. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll go. And so we do. And so Dawn and I and Kim, and actually we go up to Conway. That's where Mike lives, and James, from the FBI. We have lunch with them, talk about, kind of what's going on. And then Dawn and I and Kim, her friend, go over and meet with the solicitor. And, she is just relentless. And she, in a very nice, positive way. And she says, look, I want these charges. And she gets a commitment from him. And he was actually there Monday. Jimmy Richardson came to the civil trial from Conway to Georgetown to meet with Ray Moody. And he's actively investigating that. And then, that's Thursday. Monday, we're in court. And she's giving testimony in the civil trial against Ray. The woman is just unbelievable. And it's her wedding anniversary, on top of all else,
Yeah, it's her wedding anniversary. She's here doing this, still fighting for Brittanee 15 years after she initially went missing. And not only that, but she's helping other families because there was a girl who went missing in a nearby county, and through Kim, I think, Dawn heard about it and actually went to, I think it was in Beaufort County, and talked to these family members and kind of just was there as a helping hand and a shoulder to cry on, just there to support them. And it's amazing.
Truly inspirational. Sentencing hearing, Thursday meeting with solicitors, Sunday down in Beaufort meeting with another family, telling them, as I told the jury, what levers to pull, what buttons to push, because in a missing person case, she knows it better than anybody. And then she's in trial. Just truly, truly inspirational. Well, look, Matt, we've been going for a while. I really enjoyed this conversation. Obviously, I enjoyed trying the case with you. It's always fun.
Likewise.
As I said, to be in the foxhole. And we'll get together sometime soon and maybe talk through, what comes next. Because this is not the end.
No.
This is not the end. So appreciate it. Thanks, man. Thank you for listening to the Law Dad Roy podcast. If you have any questions for me that we can talk about on the pod, follow us, DM us on Instagram, reach out on Instagram. We're at Law Dad Roy. You can find us there on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you decide to connect. We look forward to hearing from you.
Law Dad Roy listeners, make sure you tune in next week for part 2 of the Brittanee Drexel story and how we were able to obtain a South Carolina record $700 million verdict. Remember, the Law Dad podcast is released every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, anywhere you find your podcasts. We will see you next week.